on this Wednesday night. Scenes from a real-life Canadian horror put to casual use in a popular Netflix movie. How Bird Box resurrects the haunting memory of Lac-Mégantic.
So the noes have it. The noes have it.
Theresa May wins a parliamentary vote of no confidence. So can her knack for political survival help her bring Brexit home?
It is a long-term, glacier-moving process, but at least it is a process.
And thousands of women in the RCMP have called out harassment in the force. Will a new government plan make a difference? This is The National. First, they were used to depict a nuclear explosion on the streets of London. Then they were used to illustrate a town under attack, the same fiery images in two new Netflix productions. But these scenes weren't staged for dramatic purposes. They were real-life footage of an actual event. And not just any event. They show Lac-Mégantic right after part of that small Quebec town was incinerated. Alison Northcott looks at how these haunting images were used for entertainment.
Images from the Lac-Mégantic rail disaster are dramatic and unforgettable. The 2013 tragedy killed 47 people and devastated an entire community. So to see those images appear in two recent Netflix productions has hit some viewers hard. When Guillaume Bouchard saw them in the show Travelers, he says he couldn't believe it. The fiery footage was purchased by the show's production company Peacock Alley Entertainment from a stock footage site, Pond 5, which also sold images of the disaster to the Netflix movie Bird Box. For Lac-Mégantic residents who lived through the tragedy, it's unsettling. It's troubling, he says, because it brings back the pain. The production company behind Travelers says it didn't realize the source of the pictures, and in a statement said, "We sincerely apologize and had no intention to dishonor the tragic events of 2013. Our team is working diligently to replace the footage in the show." But for the wildly popular movie Bird Box, Netflix says the Lac-Mégantic images will stay. The stock footage company says even though it can't police how its footage is used, it didn't want it used like that.
If something as sensitive as that and as tragic as that, we should have taken greater efforts to make sure that the true character of that story was represented, and we didn't live up to our own goals and our own values on that, and we could have done more.
It says it will now make sure its clients understand the context behind the pictures it sells.
I would think it's in the early moments after the crash.
Pascal Marchand makes a living selling news footage to production companies, including footage from Lac-Mégantic. He says using real news images is an easy way for producers to get dramatic footage for cheap.
Let's say they need a shot of a car on fire. They can, hire a team of firemen, production crew, the cameraman, sound guy, buy a car, set it on fire. But I mean, this costs like so much money. Thousands and thousands, as opposed to if they go online and buy a clip of a car that's burning for only $200.
He has no plans to stop selling his footage, but some companies are now taking a closer look at the way they get theirs. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
And as Alison made reference to, the Lac-Mégantic footage wasn't used in an obscure film. Netflix says more than 45 million account holders streamed the film in the first 7 days of its release, the company's best first-week showing ever.
When Abdullah Mohammed went to fight with ISIS, the Toronto man seemed to vanish into the fog of war-torn Syria. But new video has emerged showing him captured in the hands of Kurdish forces. Tonight, our senior investigative correspondent, Diana Swain, explores what we know about the Canadian ISIS fighter and what could happen next.
The first we saw of Abdullah Mohammed was this video. He was purportedly captured by Kurdish fighters in a gun battle in Syria sometime over the weekend. In Arabic, their prisoner identifies himself. Abdullah Mohammed. He now appears to be in the hands of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, who are working with the U.S. to fight ISIS in Syria. And in this video released today, he speaks in English.
I'm originally from Ethiopia, and I came from Canada. I came to Syria in 2013.
Now sporting some injuries, he explains he's been with ISIS for about 5 years, until his capture by the Kurds on the weekend.
I was captured by them after attacking one of their points and entering into a gun battle with them.
But at least one man who's followed the story of Canadian fighters who've left to join ISIS believes Mohammed may be more than a simple foot soldier.
A kind of friend of his reached out to me out of the blue and told me quite a bit of information about his childhood.
Amara Singham is a Canadian who's done extensive research on foreign fighters and believes Mohamed Abdullah Mohammed is also the man who goes by the name Abu Ridwan. He says the friend who knew Mohammed when they grew up together in Toronto saw the video and recognized him right away, and claims that as Mohammed's religious convictions grew, he adopted the nom de guerre Abu Ridwan. That's the same name Amara Singham says other fighters he's spoken to as recently as last fall claim is the voice on some of ISIS' most chilling videos.
The fighting has just begun.
The Flames of War videos were released back in 2014. Meant as a recruitment tool, they also showed extraordinary violence. The following year, ISIS released an audio tape claiming it was behind the bombings in Paris that killed 130 people.
Targeting the capital of prostitution and vice.
At the time, many, including Amara Singham, believed the man's voice was distinctly Canadian. Now, taken together, that voice, the name, the friend who recognized him from their days in Toronto, and Amara Singham believes Mohammed is the faceless fighter on those chilling videos.
The SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, just released a set of 3 videos where he's speaking in English for the first time. And if you compare the voice of that to Flames of War, I'd say it's pretty identical.
A hunch, but at this point, not conclusive. Though Amara Singham also believes Mohammed's capture says something else about his role within ISIS.
So the idea that he would travel with some of these, with the leadership to the last remaining pockets of ISIS shows that he's very likely, I mean, it's not definitive proof, but it's at least very likely that he's not just a regular fighter who was being used as cannon fodder or something like that.
So, Andrew, is it him? That still can't be known with any certainty, but you hear him say on the video himself, his name, Mohamed Abdullah Mohammed, and that he's been with ISIS.
Right.
Interestingly, he's asked by the interviewer, if we could say, from the Kurdish side that has him, how are the ISIS fighters feeling about the fact that they're being pushed into an ever smaller part of Syria? And he concedes they're not fighting as openly, as brazenly as they once did, that morale is low, and he says that some of them want to go back home.
And on that front, I mean, what about Mohammed himself? If he wants to come back, what kind of issues would that raise for Canada?
We've reached out to Global Affairs Canada, and we haven't heard anything concrete about him yet. But we can say this, that at the moment, we're not aware that he's facing any criminal charges. And if he still has his Canadian passport, in theory, he could still use it. In the past, the Canadian government has found it difficult to do much with these returning foreign fighters without hard proof that they've actually broken the law somewhere else. This case could be different because, as we all heard him say, he was captured in a fight with Kurdish forces.
Okay, our senior investigative correspondent, Diana Swain. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Now, ISIS itself made its presence felt today in the most brutal way. A suicide bombing in Syria killed 19 people, 4 of them American. It comes just weeks after the U.S. president declared ISIS defeated in Syria, vowing to pull troops out. And as Ellen Morrow tells us, the White House seems to be sticking to that plan.
The site of the explosion, a mangled mess and blood-stained facade. This was the blast as it went off. ISIS has claimed responsibility. Vice President Mike Pence condemned the attack, but insisted
we are bringing our troops home. The caliphate has crumbled and ISIS has been defeated.
Now we've won. It's time to come back.
Donald Trump's move to pull U.S. troops out of Syria has been widely criticized, triggering fears that a U.S. vacuum would equal a resurgent ISIS.
It appears right now that the president is simply hell-bent on withdrawing forces from Syria because he wants to fulfill a campaign promise.
Do you think that today's attack will change the calculus here in Washington at all?
I would like to think so, but I think it's very doubtful. I think that we see a very stubborn posture right now from the Trump administration.
President Trump was already under pressure to rethink, pressure that's growing after today's attack. Recently, a Trump supporter, Senator Lindsey Graham, veered off track at a confirmation hearing today, delivering this message.
My concern by the statements made by President Trump is that you had set in motion enthusiasm by the enemy we're fighting. Every American wants our troops to come home, but I think all of us want to make sure that when they do come home, we're safe.
A group of senators came to the White House today for a meeting on Syria. The group included critics as well as senators who support President Trump's plan to withdraw, applauding him for keeping a campaign promise. And as of now, the president has shown no sign that today's attack has changed his decision to pull out. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
Today's attack is being called the deadliest on American forces in Syria since they were deployed there in 2015.
Just a week after calling the by-election in Burnaby South, the Liberals are suddenly without a candidate to face off against NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Karin Wang quit the race today after references she made about Singh's and her ethnicity surfaced online. Renee Filipponi looks at the reaction.
It doesn't matter what language you speak, what religion you believe in.
That was Karin Wang just a few weeks ago at a debate for the Liberal nomination in Burnaby South. Today, she is out of the race over words of a different kind posted on WeChat, a Chinese social media platform. Her message in Chinese pointing out to voters that she is the only Chinese candidate in the riding that could beat Singh, noting that her opponent, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, is of Indian descent.
The strategy politically to actually mobilize Chinese and then highlight that the opponent is Indian really illuminates many complex issues.
At her campaign office today, Wang wasn't available to comment, but in a statement said, "My choice of words wasn't well considered and didn't reflect my intent. And for that, I sincerely apologize to Mr. Singh."
I think that when it comes to politics, we should always be finding ways to bring people together. So any sort of message that is dividing people, and particularly dividing them along racial lines, is not the type of politics that we want.
The Liberal Party says Wang's comments do not align with its values, but that wasn't strong enough for the opposition Conservatives.
The Prime Minister frankly failed to condemn her comments today, and that was disgusting.
Thanks so much for being here.
The stakes are high for Singh, who has been campaigning hard here, and today's news can only help.
A bit of a boon to Jagmeet Singh, but perhaps not the end of the world in terms of the long game or the big game for the Liberal Party either.
The clock is ticking for the Liberal Party to put someone up against Singh. It has until February 4th to nominate a new candidate. The by-election is scheduled for February 25th. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Burnaby South by-election is likely to be a topic of discussion on the sidelines of the Liberal cabinet retreat in Sherbrooke, Quebec, and that's where David Cochrane is tonight. So, David, let's begin with what you know about how this happened.
Yeah, Ian, the Prime Minister and his staff found out about Karin Wang's comments last night between 9 and 10 o'clock when the Star published this story. And I can tell you the Prime Minister was not happy when he heard what his candidate had to say. That led to some high-level conversations earlier today between the Prime Minister's staff and top party officials, where they made the decision that Karin Wang simply would not be allowed to run for the Liberal Party. This was then communicated to her by campaign staff in British Columbia. So while the official line is that Karin Wang resigned, the truth is she got resigned.
And what are you hearing about what the Liberals are going to do now in the riding?
Well, the scramble is on to find a candidate. At one point this afternoon, they weren't sure if they were even going to be able to run anybody, but that now appears to be the plan. There may not be enough time to run another nomination, so the Prime Minister might have to appoint a candidate. It's obviously not good for your by-election chances when you lose a candidate to a race-related controversy, but Ian, I have to tell you, there's a strong school of thought in Liberal ranks that having Jagmeet Singh win this seat and stay on as the NDP leader is in the long-term interest of the Liberal Party. In fact, when I was talking about the Karin Wang story today with a senior cabinet minister, they looked at me and said, "Good, because I want Jagmeet Singh to win."
David Cochrane in Sherbrooke tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Rosemary was in Burnaby South today to interview Jagmeet Singh. They spoke about a wide range of topics, including what could happen if he lost the by-election.
Hey, I'm in beautiful Burnaby, British Columbia. You don't even need a coat out here. We came all the way out here, of course, because this by-election is really a do-or-die moment for Jagmeet Singh. He not only has to win it, of course, but he has to try to sort of convince Canadians that he's ready for the next election, that he wants to be Prime Minister, that he has clear positions on a lot of different issues. So we talked about some of those issues. The pipeline, which he has come out against, it's part of the reason why he's running in Burnaby. Climate change, immigration, how he would approach Donald Trump, all the issues that really have to be asked of people running to be Prime Minister. And we, of course, asked Jagmeet Singh, what happens if you don't win this by-election? Because it's always a possibility. Well, he says he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I will be the leader that leads the New Democratic Party into the 2019 election. I'm confident we're going to do well in this riding. We're connecting with people, we're getting a lot of support, and we're providing solutions to the problems that people are faced with.
So as we get ever closer to the election, that full interview with Jagmeet Singh will air on Sunday. We're going to talk to all the leaders about where they stand on some of these same issues. In the meantime, though, you don't have to wait too long for all analysis of the craziness that's happened this week. The same week there was a cabinet shuffle. A Liberal had to quit from this by-election here in Burnaby. We'll dig into all of that with the At Issue gang on tomorrow's show, my favorite night of the week.
Turning now to another big story in Ottawa tonight, a move to address the bullying and sexual harassment of female RCMP officers that's tarnished the force for years. For the first time, the force is bringing in civilians, an advisory board specifically, for transparency, credibility, and an independent perspective.
There can be no room and no tolerance for workplace harassment, bullying, or sexual misconduct.
Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale calls it a meaningful beginning, acknowledging the need to change the culture of the force.
I started to normalize the harassment because I didn't know what else to do.
Since former Constable Catherine Galliford came forward to CBC News in 2011, many more women have shared their experiences. There was a class action lawsuit that led to a formal apology from the RCMP and a multi-million-dollar settlement. Also, Ottawa has tasked the RCMP's first female commissioner with modernizing the force, the way it thinks, acts, and behaves.
We want to be a more modern, a more effective, a more healthy, and more inclusive national police organization.
Now, it's hard to argue with the intention of the move, but what kind of change it'll amount to, that's a whole other question, and a tricky one. Catherine Cullen explains why.
Providing advice and support and assistance to the commissioner.
Watching today's announcement, Sherry Benson-Podolchuk is filled with hope.
This is a step forward. This is something that they've never done, that in my lifetime I never thought I would see.
In her 20 years with the RCMP, she knew the pain of bullying and harassment. She says colleagues gave her cruel, sexualized nicknames and that someone left a dead bird in her gym bag.
Bullying is a slow and painful death.
She later sued the force and in 2009 settled out of court. She hopes bringing in outsiders will help change the culture of the RCMP.
Historically, they like to keep everything in-house. They don't like to let anything go out into the public.
Change is certainly the government's hope.
This is an innovation in the structure of the RCMP that has never existed before in 145 years.
But the 13-member civilian board won't look at individual harassment claims, just recommend general procedures and ways to improve the force. Lawyer Emma Phillips co-authored one of the reports recommending civilian oversight, but she questions just how much bite this board will have.
To what degree will the RCMP and the senior leadership feel that they really are accountable to this organization? What happens if they don't follow the guidance of the advisory board?
A group representing some RCMP members says this is a positive move, but doesn't want the civilian board to overstep.
Cops should be cops, and administration should be administration.
One thing everyone seems to agree on, any real change won't be quick.
This is not a Band-Aid fix. This is not, wow, miracle cure. It is a long-term, glacier-moving process, but at least it is a process.
One she hopes will restore trust in what she believes is a broken system. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Here are some other stories we're following tonight on The National. A second Canadian has disappeared in the West African country of Burkina Faso. It's believed Kirk Woodman was abducted by several gunmen on a mining site in the country's north. He works for Progress Minerals, a BC-based mining company that owns the site. In a statement, his family says, "We have faith and trust in Canadian authorities to bring our husband and father home safe." Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister has also commented.
We are in touch with the authorities in Burkina Faso, and the relevant Canadian agencies are very much engaged in this difficult situation.
Just last month, a 34-year-old woman from Quebec disappeared, along with her Italian companion. Canada's travel advisory for Burkina Faso says to avoid all non-essential travel because of the threat of terrorism. St. Michael's College School in Toronto has reinstated its varsity basketball team. The private school was rocked by allegations of sexual assault by students late last year. As a result, the basketball program was canceled, and the school now says it's completed an internal investigation that cleared the remaining team members of any wrongdoing. The football program for next year remains canceled.
And two got set to too strong. Too experienced by 2 sets to 1 into the third round. 6-3.
Well, a short while ago, Bianca Andreescu was eliminated from the Australian Open tennis tournament. The 18-year-old from Ontario lost in 3 sets in her second-round match. Fellow Canadian Milos Raonic is on center court now against Stan Wawrinka. Raonic has just lost the first set 7-6 in a tiebreaker. Also playing later tonight, Denis Shapovalov and Eugenie Bouchard, who takes on Serena Williams.
And still ahead on The National, an important story for women planning a trip south this winter. Remember the Zika virus? Well, the threat's not over.
And a fix for loneliness. Thomas Dagler rides along with postal workers, delivering a little company along with the mail.
But first, we have full coverage of the UK's dramatic confidence vote from here in Parliament Square. Prime Minister Theresa May hangs on to her job by a hair. So what happens next?
Now, over 2.5 years later, it's time for us to come together, put the national interest first, and deliver on the referendum.
We'll see right after this. We are here tonight in front of the British Parliament, where hours ago Theresa May narrowly escaped political catastrophe. One day after her Brexit plan was killed by a vote of historic proportions, May has secured the confidence of the House, but barely.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325.
Just 19 votes spelled the difference between game over and play on. Having passed this hurdle, May must now work with a parliament still fractured and a European Union growing impatient. The time for playing games is over, the German foreign minister insisted today, adding that the EU might consider postponing the March 29th deadline to begin Brexit, but it's not flexible on the terms. Late tonight, Theresa May struck a tone of urgent resolve.
It will not be an easy task, but MPs know they have a duty to act in the national interest, reach a consensus, and get this done.
The CBC's Thomas Dagler was watching closely as May dodged her political demise in a country growing tired of endless drama.
Even in a place that's seen this much history, there's never been anything quite like the battle for Brexit. The tension outside Parliament rising to a fever pitch last night as the country wrestled with its future. Today came the glum realization nothing's changed, and Brexit is still stuck.
Here we are, almost 3 years on, no nearer to knowing what the hell is going on.
Westminster is in chaos.
They can't agree on the best way forward either, but the opposition thought they'd start by driving out the Prime Minister.
She lacks the authority on the world stage to negotiate this deal. Ultimately, she has failed.
Theresa May facing a no-confidence vote, still not offering a backup plan to her failed Brexit deal, still hanging on.
We do have a long way to go, but I don't believe a general election is the path to do that.
Simon Horton trains negotiators using simple steps that he says would apply to Brexit talks too.
So it's called the behavioural change stairway.
Step 1, listen. He would advise May to do more of that. And also,
rule number 1 in negotiation is have a clear outcome of what you want to achieve. And unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case.
She had been expected to overcome today's challenge in Parliament.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325.
But was likely still relieved to hear the result. Tonight, she chose the grand stage of Downing Street to address the country once again.
We must all work constructively together to set out what Parliament does want.
Yes, that's a pledge to listen more. Then, by Monday, she's set to return here with a plan. Some way out of this mess.
Okay, so Thomas, the Labour Party obviously failed to oust her. Can you walk us through what ways it still has to maybe limit her options?
Yeah, well, some in the Labour Party see this as just the beginning. They want a series of no-confidence votes to embarrass the Prime Minister. There's also a movement within the party for what they call a people's vote, that second referendum. In fact, 71 Labour MPs signed a letter to their leader, Jeremy Corbyn, today, demanding he pile pressure on the Prime Minister for that second referendum. So far, he is refusing to do so. If anything, today has shown that not only does the Prime Minister not have control, neither does Jeremy Corbyn, and no one's willing to take ownership of this.
Okay, Thomas, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
So how to explain the unsinkable Theresa May? How does she carry on, chasing a goal that borders on the impossible and wearing the blame for a kingdom stuck in crisis?
Ian Blackford.
Again with the derision.
The Prime Minister has no answer. She has failed.
That, Mr. Speaker, alone should be grounds for her to go.
Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that with every other previous Prime Minister faced with the scale of defeat last night, they would have resigned?
That is a very good point. Why no resignation? Why did Theresa May politically survive this day? How did she become the gravity-defying Prime Minister?
Margaret Thatcher.
Joey Jones, who used to work with her, saw those questions start when she called a general election that didn't go as her party had hoped.
From that moment, she said she was basically serving based on whether or not the party wanted her to serve. So it's a really weird situation in which she finds herself profoundly weakened. Every time you think she can't go any lower, her authority is shattered still further.
In the fall, her own party tried to oust her, an insurrection by Brexiteers in her midst.
This is not Brexit. This is a failure of government policy.
The Prime Minister.
She survived that quasi-coup attempt as well. An easy explanation? People in this country are quick to cite her doggedness. She just keeps pushing. The Prime Minister has heard that wielded as compliment and complaint, suggesting to BBC Panorama that she knows how and when to use her stubbornness.
You bide your time, and you're bloody difficult when the time is right and when it really matters.
But persistence alone doesn't explain her staying power.
This is the most turbulent premiership in political history for 100 years in Britain.
Prime Ministerial biographer Sir Anthony Selden, who also wrote the book How Tory Governments Fall, says there are 9 basic steps to collapsing. May's government has done all of them, and yet it still stands.
Why is she still there? Partly because she is very resilient, partly because there is no alternative waiting in the wing, a plausible successor around whom people can rally, and partly because there's no other plan.
Have you got a plan B, Prime Minister?
To be viewed as the least worst option is hardly praise, but it might not be wrong. No one else seems eager to steer the ship into waters quite this rough. If Brexit is a disaster, she'll wear it. Certainly the papers seem primed for that already. But in the end, if it works, wait for the praise for the brave brinkmanship, the references to her being underrated. Not yet, though. Now let the cartoonists take the temperature. This morning's offering in the Daily Telegraph, winter is coming. May trudges along and alone. Who better to comment on May's longevity than a fellow Conservative who tried to bring her down?
Why then did 120 of us vote against the Prime Minister yesterday?
It's been reported that Jacob Rees-Mogg held a champagne party last night after the crushing defeat of May's Brexit deal.
I'd look at it more as a meeting with a drink rather than a grand celebration.
As you just saw, he was behind that Conservative revolt against May in November. So famous for slamming the Prime Minister, he's shown here in effigy booting her Brexit bus over a cliff. Many see Rees-Mogg as having his own sights set on 10 Downing. His ambitions are openly mocked, but make no mistake, he is popular in his party, and his vision of a Britain ruled only by itself has strong appeal. I met him earlier for his perspective on Brexit and his frequent target, Theresa May. It's interesting watching. As someone from Theresa May's own party who openly challenged her in the fall, how do you explain her staying power? She survived that vote tonight.
Well, the vote earlier was on whether she should be leader of the Conservative Party. The vote tonight was whether we should have a Conservative government. Understandably, all Conservatives want to have a Conservative government because the country being led by a hard left Marxist Jeremy Corbyn would be disastrous.
Do you think she has some remarkable staying power, though? Because some people think she survives tests others wouldn't.
Absolutely, no. She makes the Duracell bunny look like a lightweight, that she continues going when all others are left standing. It's very impressive.
But come March 29th, if Brexit happens without a deal, what some here call a hard Brexit, if you will, there is so much talk about what to be afraid of in that moment. As a hardcore Brexiteer, what's one tangible thing people should be looking forward to, from your view?
If we leave without a deal, we save £39 billion of taxpayers' money, which we don't have to hand over to the EU, and we can cut tariffs and non-tariff barriers. So we can import all sorts of wonderful things from Canada that we currently restrict.
That's a good attempt to speak to the Canadians. I appreciate that. But for the people of this country?
Well, that'd be good for the people of this country because the pound in their pocket will go further because the goods they buy from abroad will be cheaper.
Do you want to be Prime Minister of this country?
Me, no, I'm a backbench MP. If there were a change of leader tomorrow, I would support Boris Johnson for the leadership.
I'm trying to look deep into your eyes here because I'm not entirely convinced I believe you. I think a lot of people look at you and see great ambition there.
In our constitutional system, you don't go from being a backbench MP to being leader of the party when the party is in government. And I have to be realistic about that. So it doesn't matter whether I want to or not, it's not going to arise. And therefore it's sensible for me to support somebody who I think could lead Brexit effectively.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
No, that's a great pleasure.
So what's next for Theresa May? Here's a reminder of what she might be considering. May could go back to the EU. She could ask them for a better deal for Britain, concessions that would need to be swiftly negotiated before that deadline. Or she could ask to have the deadline pushed back. It's an unlikely option, but May could roll the dice by calling a snap election to try to gain more support in Parliament, or another referendum, something she's vowed not to do. Failing that, Britain could leave on schedule, but with no deal. So as Thomas mentioned, it's always possible for the Labour Party to introduce another motion of no confidence. If May is finally toppled, a group of MPs is said to be waiting in the wings, hoping to make a play for control of the House.
Still ahead on The National. A side gig for postal workers is the UK's clever fix for loneliness. Thomas Dagler continues our series.
And hey, folks in Ottawa, if you see Elizabeth, say hi. She was on board that OC Transpo bus that crashed in a horrible way last week, and now her family's asking for the public's help to encourage her back on.
But if you're on that bus and you see Elizabeth, if you could just reach out to her and say, "Hi, Elizabeth, I heard I see you're upset."
Have to be a war. You have to fight against the mosquito.
The news a few years ago led to dire warnings.
There is no immunity. Expect huge numbers of infections.
Zika was spreading fast. The mosquito-borne virus, harmless to most, but in pregnant women could cause severe birth defects.
These are permanent deformities and result in death in a lot of children.
Brazil was hit so hard, there were calls to cancel the 2016 Olympic Games. Governments, including Canada, spent millions to fight it and issued warnings to at-risk travelers. Stay away from Zika hotspots. But then the warnings subsided and Zika fell out of the headlines. But the virus wasn't gone. In fact, as Canadians book winter holidays, Christine Birak checks in on where it has spread.
Tickets to Guyana for Grandma's 80th was the plan until Layla Bast found out she was pregnant and thought, whatever happened to Zika virus?
I think it's something that, because it's not in the news, it's not really a threat here anymore, that it is not thought about, and it is a concern for, people who are going away, because, it takes one bite. That's all it takes.
A warning etched in her memory because Bast was also pregnant 3 years ago when the World Health Organization declared Zika a worldwide emergency. Pregnant women bitten by Zika-infected mosquitoes were giving birth to babies with a brain-damaging condition called microcephaly. 45 pregnant Canadian women were infected during travel or through sex with an infected partner, and as many as 5 gave birth to babies with severe abnormalities. But now?
Even to bring it up to my doctor, he was quite shocked when I asked him to look into it for me.
There are currently more than 80 countries reporting risk of Zika, including popular tourist destinations.
The overall burden of the disease is likely much lower now compared to what it was 3 years ago during the epidemic, but it's certainly not 0% in many places. So here's the CDC world map. And you can see, obviously,
Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Along with countries in the Caribbean and Southeast Asia, including Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and India, places pregnant women are advised to avoid, and couples who are planning to have a baby should be cautious about.
I think these are very good conversations to have with the healthcare provider.
Every major outbreak and threat that's happening around the world right now is here on this map.
Dr. Cameron Kahn has been tracking Zika, among other viruses, for years, even predicting Zika would arrive in the U.S. 6 months before it did.
In India, Zika transmission was occurring, in the fall.
He and his team use worldwide data, real-time monitoring, and artificial intelligence to fuel this early warning system. He says Canadians shouldn't panic over Zika, but the risk of infection is real.
This is one of those situations where the likelihood may be quite low, but the consequence may be quite high.
Oh my gosh.
A risk that Bast simply isn't willing to take. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Next on The National, a fix for the loneliness that can be experienced by elderly people who live alone. We go back to Britain, where postal workers are delivering more than mail.
How's your health this week compared to last week? Is it better?
Just the same, really.
Between 1 and 10, overall, how happy have you been this week?
8.
8.
This week, The National is taking a look at the distressing phenomenon of loneliness in Canada. It is a growing problem that's also a public health risk. The UK is facing this issue head-on, actually naming a Minister of Loneliness and launching a government-wide strategy. Government research found that 9 million people in the UK describe themselves as always or often lonely. And 200,000 British seniors haven't had a conversation with a friend or relative over the course of more than a month. In a way, it's a kind of solitary confinement. And that's where the Royal Mail comes in. They've been tasked with delivering more than just letters and packages, a pilot program to fight loneliness. Here's Thomas Dagla with the fix.
Twice a week comes a welcome visitor, always dressed in red, and here to check in on the 93-year-old living alone behind that door.
Morning, Mrs. Haynes.
Morning, love.
You okay today?
A chat with the mailman brings a smile. It's simple, but effective, it seems, in fighting loneliness.
It's nice for someone to knock, and have a word with you.
For British postal workers, the day starts much earlier, sorting tons of letters and parcels to get out the door pronto. Yes, even in this era of text and social media, Royal Mail delivers tens of millions of items of regular old mail 6 days a week.
There is a massive time issue with the job because it's getting so busy now.
Billy Giblin is among a dozen mail carriers here in Liverpool trying out a project aimed at the older customers named on those envelopes. For him, the main challenge is finding enough time in a constant race against the clock.
I come away feeling as though I've done a good deed for me day.
With today's mail sorted and his van loaded, it's time to hit the road. Even as temperatures drop, Giblin keeps those shorts on because his job involves so much running around. It's just a quick drive to North Liverpool, where he's been delivering mail for more than 30 years. He knows the neighborhood, and the neighbors know him.
All right, Terry.
Spots that uniform on the street, and there's no guessing what he's up to. Part of the reason British mail carriers are uniquely positioned to walk up to just about anyone.
Okay, excuse me. Thanks a lot, Daniel.
Customers eager for their mail, or those at risk of feeling lonely.
I'd like to think that people trust the Royal Mail. I mean, we've been around for a long time with a friendly face. Thank you. Take care. See you later.
Workers are being assigned to no more than 2 seniors each to drop in a couple times a week on their mail run. This is a pilot project being tried out in 3 areas across Britain until March. After that, it'll be up to government officials to decide whether it's worth the funding and whether to expand it across the UK. We tried to keep up and chat about the project, but on his mail run, Giblin's not easy to follow. What kind of questions do you have to go through?
We go through a question about the health, about the social connectivity, whether or not they're getting out, about problems that might be arising in the area, and about whether or not they need to see someone on a regular occurrence. Let's go on.
This country's population keeps growing older, and officials expect as many as 2 million seniors in England could soon be suffering from loneliness, an affliction associated with greater health risks from heart disease to dementia.
The principles are terribly simple.
So campaigners for senior care say loneliness needs to be tackled urgently.
We've got a huge growing unhealthy time bomb in terms of possible demand for health and care services that may not be there.
So, along with a bag full of mail, more letter carriers could soon be delivering reassurance to seniors.
How's your health this week compared to last week? Is it better?
Just the same, really.
Dropping in on customers like Margaret Heens.
Between 1 and 10, overall, how happy have you been this week?
8.
8.
Asking those pre-planned questions and sending the answers to experts using a handheld device.
So you have been having slight difficulties getting out?
I have been out, yes.
Okay, no problem.
Afterwards, we couldn't help but ask Mrs. Heens what she thinks of it all.
Oh, good idea. Definitely a good idea, yes. Should be advertised, as I said before, you know.
How does it
I think it's really good.
How does it help you?
Well, you feel more confident, yes.
I know. Take care. Take care.
And with that, the postman's back on his route again. He'll return for another chat on Monday. I'm getting out of breath. Yeah, I'm glad you're now jumping in your van.
No, that's
You're
it.
not that-
I mean,
more walking.
If you look at me van, I mean, that's mine. That's just me. I do that.
Through every piece of mail, Giblin's touching somebody's life in one way or another, and he's still got plenty left to deliver. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Liverpool.
What a great idea. Elegantly simple. But yeah, it looked tiring. Our moment is next. We meet an Ottawa family who turned to social media to help get their daughter back on the bus after surviving Friday's deadly crash.
We want her to be the strong, independent, confident woman that she is and to be back on the buses on her own.
Like so many who were on that Ottawa bus last Friday or nearby, Elizabeth Langan is having a hard time getting back to her routine. The 25-year-old has Down syndrome. She was in shock after the deadly crash, so her parents turned to social media for help. Their simple request to others is our moment.
if you're on that bus and you see Elizabeth, if you could just reach out to her and say, hi, Elizabeth, I heard I see you're upset and that you were on the bus accident and I'm here to help you. Would you like us to call your parents? She may just need that, or she may need a phone call to us. We want her to be the strong, independent, confident woman that she is. It's actually overwhelming. All the responses were just incredible, like so supportive and loving. If they don't take the bus, they're like, my husband takes that bus, and I'll make sure he sees this and he sees her picture and he'll reach out to her. And it's been one comment like that after another that have reached out to us, and I just feel really blessed.
I felt really happy. I just want to say thank you for the hugs and the hearts and all the support that have given me.
Aw. They find it overwhelming, Andrew. It is touching, obviously. One small point, that Facebook page is actually a neighborhood community Facebook page. I wish we had one on our block. What a great way to connect.
Yeah, no kidding. And so as you heard, I mean, that's kind of where they've had the best response. People apparently replying in droves saying like, yes, absolutely. We would love to say hi to Elizabeth and to console her or to support her if they see her out and about riding the bus. And Elizabeth's mom has talked at length about how important that being able to ride the bus alone is for her, sort of key to freedom, and a terrible thing to lose because of a singular terrible moment in time. But boy, what a response. And I dare say she's going to be perhaps a minor celebrity after this story plays across the country. Thanks for joining us, folks. That's The National for this Thursday, January 16th. Good night.
Good night.